Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. Really excited and ecstatic today to be joined by Chris Black. Not only is he a musician, but he's written a book called Achieve a Winning Mindset, and I think that's something we can all grow by. His story is incredible of some of the health issues that he's overcome, and I appreciate you joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thanks so much.
My
Sure.
pleasure. I'm glad.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to roll back the hands of time and just find out how you became interested in music and how you found it to be your instrument.
So music is in my family. Everybody plays.
Right.
You know, my father played guitar. He played bass. He sang. My cousins, my uncle. So it's everywhere.
Right.
Generations. So it was inevitable that I was going to play. All of my brothers play.
Sure.
You know, everyone is professional. So, you know, I started on drums, like a lot of musicians
Yes.
do. You know, I started playing bass guitar when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was one of those. I wanted to play drums, but you know, I actually didn't really want to play bass guitar. You know, I was sitting in the living room one day, watching TV,
Right.
and my mother said, "Hey, boy, tell your daddy to go in there and show you something on his bass."
Right.
And that,
And do you feel like it was like love at first sight type of situation, or it
actually-
just grew on you?
It wasn't. You know, in the beginning, I would get headaches. I didn't really want to do it.
Right.
You know, he said, when you come home from school, you practice for an hour.
Right.
You do your homework, you practice. Then you can go outside.
Sure.
After about 3 months,
Right.
you know, 4 months, you know, it grew on me. You know, I started to love it.
Right.
And then I started seeing the girls liked it, so
Sure. That didn't hurt. That didn't hurt. So,
that helped. That helped.
Sure.
That helped.
Now it's a long way from having a dream or a passion about it to actually really exploring a career.
Right.
How did that all evolve?
Well, you know, after I fell in love with it, you know, it became a part of me.
Right.
You know, and the people, you know, I was young. I thought I was good.
Right. Some other people thought you were
Right.
good.
But when I was probably 14 years old, someone actually, you know, hired me, you know, to go in the studio. That was the first time I got paid,
Right.
you know, to go do something. And I was like, this is something. And then I started getting visions of this is what I wanted to do.
Right.
You know, I wanted to tour, I wanted to travel, that's what I wanted to do. So I'd start honing in on practicing and things like that. Yeah.
What are some of those opportunities that you feel like, wow, that was just definitely a magic moment or heaven sent?
Well, when I was younger, of course, I came up in church. So
Right.
so when I was younger, I had an opportunity to play for, you know, gospel artists,
Right.
you know, that were on the radio,
Sure.
which I thought that was great. You know, Clark Sisters, I
Yes.
played with them when I was a teenager.
Right.
James Moore, which he's passed away.
Sure.
So there was a lot of those moments. I was like, okay, that I can really do this.
Right.
When I became probably 17 to 18 years old, that was my first R&B gig that I thought was, you know, and so it was, and what was his name? He was on Apollo, and he was on Apollo for 12 weeks,
Right.
you know. And so I had an opportunity to play for him. He was like my first R&B. And after that, you know, I had a vision of continued. One night I had a dream that I saw myself in this football field.
Oh, okay.
And there's no one but me. And around the football field was a fence, right? And I heard this voice say that the gift that I've given you, it's not supposed to be inside it. And at 18 years old, you know, I didn't really understand it as much, but I started to understand that my gift, it was supposed to go around the world. You know, that's what it was supposed to be. And I was around 18, and that artist I played for was David Peaston. I don't know if you remember David Peaston,
Yeah.
but I played with him when I was 18 years old. And then that's when things just kind of started taking off from there. I went on the road early.
Right.
You know, I started going on the road when I was like 19,
Sure.
you know, playing for different artists. So yeah, so that was my journey.
Right. What did you enjoy most about it, and what do you feel were some of the biggest challenges? at
About
such a
going on
young
the road?
age? Yeah, going on the road and touring with big groups.
Probably some of my biggest challenge. I mean, it was fun, you know, but some of the biggest challenges, you go from city to city,
Right.
living out of a suitcase, no home cooked meals, you know, none of that, and I was eating everywhere.
Right.
I started to gain weight.
Right.
You know, didn't realize I was gaining the weight that I was gaining, but I started gaining weight. That was probably some of the biggest challenges, being away from home, you know, and doing that. But it was fun. It was a fun time.
Sure. And then now, this whole concept of MS, what did you first started noticing, and how did that diagnosis come about?
Well, probably now I've been on the road for a long time. Back home, I'm from St. Louis, but this time I'm living in Houston, Texas.
Sure.
I opened up a school. You know, I was busy. I opened up a music and art school. I'm still playing music. I'm doing real estate. I'm just doing all this stuff. And I started recognizing there's some things happening with my body. But as a man, you just, you know, it'll be fine.
No big deal.
And that probably happened a year or so, to where I started doing things like drinking 4 energy drinks a day, just to keep my body really kind of going. And I'm still playing, I'm still doing the things that I'm doing, but I'm having issues, but I'm ignoring the issues because I'm thinking everything is more important. Everybody is more important. And that's what I was doing. But it came to a point, I went on the road, artist Les McCann. Great time, great artist. I had so much fun. We went overseas, went to Germany. I come back, I pass out. I couldn't ignore it anymore. You know, I had a school, I passed out in the school. This is early in the morning. You know, we were open from 6 to 6. Passed out, and just to let you know just where my mindset was at, I called my director, told her to come. I got in my car and I drove myself to the emergency room, not thinking that I could possibly black out again. You know, that was the first time that I realized that something is going on. You know, but when I got to the hospital, they said, "Oh, you're dehydrated, and you need to drink some more water, get some rest." And you know, I did that, but my body, I'm coming back from Germany, my body would not get back. It's like the equilibrium and just the time, it just wouldn't get back. This was in May. And by the time I got to June, little by little, my body started weakening. By the time I got to June, I couldn't walk. You know, initially, someone was taking care of me. You know, I couldn't take care of myself anymore. I could barely move and walk and things like that. But by the time I got to June, I couldn't walk at all.
And it sounds like they didn't really have a sense as to what was going on at all.
They didn't know.
It's not an easy diagnosis to make, and it's not common in men.
Right, and you got to remember, this is 2001.
Right.
So they kept. I went to the doctor, and they kept saying, "Oh, it's this and that." I went to a specialist, and they was like, they kept telling me things, and they just really didn't know. So by the time I went and I could walk, they still didn't know. But I was telling them that I had issues with food wouldn't stay down, and things like that. And I remember going, they was gonna do a CAT scan. And I told the doctor, I said, you know, movement and things, it's making whatever in my stomach come up. But they didn't wanna believe me. So he had me, you know, they put me in the CAT scan thing, and they moved me around, and what did I do? Now you mad, but I already told you. You know, that's what it was. But that same doctor, he had me to, he took his hand and wanted me to move it. And then he told me to take my hand and touch my nose. And I couldn't do it. He told me to take my hand and touch my nose, and I did this. And I could not touch my nose. He said, "We don't know what's wrong, but we know something is wrong." Because we can physically see it. The CAT scan is not telling us anything, but we know something is wrong. And this was June 2001.
And then how they finally make the diagnosis? I know in some cases they'll do spinal tap.
Yes.
And
so we went through a lot of tests. You know, we went through a lot of tests. It took them a little while, you know, to kind of figure it out. You know. I got there in June. They didn't figure it out until August.
Right, because you're young, you're male, you're black. It's not as common.
When I went to the hospital, I was 30. And so first they said I had a stroke.
Right.
Then they said Lyme disease. Then because I was overseas, so they were just kind of going through a lot of things. It even got to a point to where they told my family that I was failing. My body was failing.
Right.
And if they wanted to see me alive, because they didn't know what was going on,
Sure.
they needed to see me
Right.
because they didn't know how much time I had.
Right. Wow. And that's super scary.
That was super
real?
scary. That was super scary because I was in one hospital and they finally, after 2 or 3 weeks, they said, well, you have lesions in your brain, but not knowing that's a part of,
Sure.
the MS. They said you have lesions in your brain, so we know what's wrong. It's in your cerebellum.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to do brain surgery.
Wow.
And Rogers came in, they had me sign and at that point I'm like, okay, there's an answer to what's going on.
Right.
So this is going to fix it. So let's do it. So they moved me from one hospital to another hospital. And I never will forget that the doctor came in this was a different neurologist, came in about 4 o'clock in the morning and said that we're not going to do brain surgery because it's something else.
Right.
And we feel like if we do brain surgery, it's not going to help you.
Right.
That's the best,
Sure.
the best thing they could have done.
Sure. Right. Because that's definitely not treatment for it.
Right. So at that point, I think, he was one of the ones that kind of took the lead on finding out, okay, this is MS.
Right.
This is something else. So, they told me that it was something I would have the rest of my life. They told me that we're going to have to teach you how to walk again.
Right.
We're going to have to teach you your fine motor skills again. We're going to have to, they start giving me steroids through my IV.
Right.
I start walking with a walker. They would put the big, weight belt
Right. Exactly.
around me,
Yeah,
to pick me out of bed. And initially, I'm telling you, initially to walk with that walker just from the bed to the door,
Right.
that was
Right.
that was the struggle. That was a struggle because I didn't have any strength.
Right.
Eventually, I got better. I was able to go into the hallway and walk with a walker. And that happened probably a few weeks or so,
Right.
doing that. And then they tried to get me to walk with a cane. Right. So all this time, I remember, what is MS?
Right.
I don't know I'm 30.
Sure. Never heard of that.
I've never even heard of it. I mean, I've heard of it,
Right.
but I don't know what it
Regulator,
is.
sure.
I'm a young man.
Right.
So and I remember asking the doctor, I said, are you sure? Are you sure? Because I went through a lot of emotions.
Of course. All of them probably.
I was depressed.
Right.
I thought about suicide.
Sure.
It's just all of these things because I'm 30 years old.
Right.
I've been doing all these things in my life. I got all these plans.
Right.
I've been traveling the world.
Right.
I've been playing with these different people, and now I can't do none of it.
Right.
I can't even feed myself.
Right. Sure.
So
Right. What's the point?
what's the point now?
Right.
What is the point of living when I can't live?
Right. Literally.
Right, literally.
Right.
And I remember them bringing the bass guitar. The doctor thought that maybe if they brought my bass guitar to the hospital, it would cheer me up.
Right.
It did the opposite because I could not hold it. I couldn't put my hand around it. I couldn't do anything. So that made it even more depressing to know that here's an instrument that I've been playing since I was 9 years old.
Right.
I'm 30 and I can't even hold it.
Right.
A guy came to the hospital and he was a musician as well. And he started asking me some questions. And he was like, well, you still got your mind. You may not have physical strength, but you still have it in your mind. And, I am a spiritual person. I came up in church and all of that. And I did have a lot of moments where I heard a voice talking to me during this whole time.
Right.
And one of the things that I heard was as long as you have your mind, you have your gift.
Right.
I was like, okay, worry about your healing. Stop worrying about everything else. Don't worry about your healing, but take this time to heal.
Right.
And I had to stop thinking about what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
What is and what's not going to happen. I had to think about present You know, what am I doing right now? And I did have a moment to where I was like, okay, this can't be it. This is not it. My life is not going to be defined by this moment, you know? And I didn't allow it to define me, you know? I said I was going to walk again.
Right.
I said I was going to play my instrument again, you know? And that's exactly what I did,
Sure.
you know?
What are those steps do you feel you did to really overcome it in terms of changing your diet, your lifestyle, putting in the work?
It was a lot. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but that's kind of where the title of the book came from. And so one of the nights I was in the hospital, and mind you, at this point, I had been in the hospital 3 months, 3.5 months.
Right.
Hadn't taken a bath. You know, people, they bathing me every day, and
Right.
you know, all of that, bedpan. So one day, I hear a voice that says, so you say you want to be healed. And I'm thinking, sure, yeah. I mean, why you even question? Right, why isn't even question? So the voice says, walk like you are. Walk like you are healed. And I'm thinking, well, I can't walk like I am because I can't.
Right, not possible. Right.
So what does it even mean? And I remember sitting in the bed, and the voice was as audible and clear to me like someone was in the room, but no one was in the room but me. And so I remember saying, I want to take a bath. I really, really want to take a bath. And as simple as that is, it's huge.
Because you couldn't do it yourself.
Right, because I couldn't do it. So I had an IV in both arms, you know. And I remember calling the nurse, telling the nurse I'm going to take a bath. So this particular day, nurse I had never seen. She comes in, I said, I want to take a bath. She just says, okay. I was like, okay. In my chart, it says, can't get out the
bed.
Right. Can't get out the bed unless I had to have 2 guys come and help me.
Right.
She didn't say nothing.
Right.
And she took the IVs out. She wrapped my arm in plastic and left.
Right.
And I said, okay. I got out the bed, and to this day, and I've always tried to think and remember and all of that, but to this day, I don't exactly remember crossing the room.
Right.
There was nothing for me to hold on to. It was my bed to the bathroom. I don't really remember how far it was, but I remember I did take a bath. Got back in my bed. I had those socks that I had to wear.
Right. They don't even have them now, but
yeah,
they did
I put those socks back on, and I got back in the bed.
Right.
And that was the moment that I was like, it started from here. You know, that was one of my aha moments that I was like, okay, I can be healed. You know, it started from where I thought in my mind.
Right.
I believed I could, and I did. You know, so it did get to the point to where I started to get better.
Right.
I started walking with a cane.
Right.
Now, I used to wear a patch over one eye. I have optic neuritis. My eyes stopped working together. I don't know if you're familiar. Your eyes got to work together in order to see.
Right.
They got to focus together.
Right.
My eyes stopped focusing together. They tried to focus independently. So in order for me to see, I had to wear a patch. So I stopped doing that. You know, I was taking medication for, and I don't know the technical word for it, but I had what's called a hiccup disease, where I would just hiccup.
Right.
You know, and I was taking medication for that. That went away. Didn't have eye patch anymore, and I'm just walking with a cane now.
Right.
Until eventually, that I'm still taking the steroids, still taking the medication, but I was a big guy too.
Right. Right. You're seeing improvement.
I was 300 pounds at first.
Right.
Started losing weight. I started eating better.
Right.
No seasoning.
Right.
None.
Right. Which took a bit to get used to.
That was a challenge.
Okay.
It was a challenge.
Yeah.
But no seasoning, no fried food.
Right.
So that was, the at that time the nutritionist was like, you got to eat like this.
Right.
And that's exactly what I did, and I started to get better. But then I started thinking, why am I getting better?
Sure.
Because of what they said.
Sure. Right.
That I'm not really supposed to get better. I started walking better. Now, I had my bouts of drop foot.
Right.
You're familiar with drop foot. I would walk on my left side, and it would just weaken, and it would just drag. And so that would happen. I would go to the track, and I would do that. And I had a guy that would come pick me up every day, and he would say, "I'm gonna be your accountability partner, and we're gonna go walk."
Right.
Every day.
Wow, that's so great.
And we're going to walk every day. And I had been knowing him since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So he saw me from,
Right.
before I was playing bass all the way up to that. So he was there. He was there for me.
Right.
But it came to a point that I started to inquire within myself about what is it. I know that I am thinking better. I know that I'm doing that. I know that I am doing the exercises that they had me do from the chair.
Right.
I know that I'm doing them things, but I'm doing better though. I'm really, really doing better. Until I start to read. I start to read. I start to take classes to start to understand what I was doing. And one of the first things that I was doing that I didn't know that I was doing was self-hypnosis.
Okay.
I didn't know I was doing that.
Sure.
It just seemed natural to me.
Right.
Meditation.
Sure.
It just seemed natural. So when I start to read about it, I was like, I'm doing that.
Right. That's it. That's it.
That's it right there. I'm doing that. I started reading something called NLP. I was like, this is the stuff that I'm doing. So it made me go and study more.
Right.
I ended up getting my certification in it, in NLP, in
Right.
hypnosis. I start being a sponge.
Sure.
To just take a lot of classes. I took classes from, you name it. I took classes from Duke.
Right. Right.
I was just taking classes, which eventually led me to get my doctorate in psychology.
Right. Wow. And that's something that's so amazing because we've talked many times with people that were sort of heading down a more academic pathway and then really got bit by the music bug, or they had it all along and now the opportunity came. But to see this one go full circle, where you were fully established in your career,
Right.
and a health issue sort of inspired you so much to pursue that is something that's really incredible.
Yeah, my thing was I wanted to help other people.
Yes.
I wanted other people to experience what I experienced.
Sure.
Because I know that healing is not just for me.
Sure. No. Right.
It's no respect on it.
Right.
Right. I got it. You got it.
Right. Everybody have it.
Everybody
Right.
has it.
Right.
But everyone is not. They haven't accepted the fact that they have the ability to do so.
Sure.
For whatever reason that's happened in their life.
Right.
So I wanted to be that conduit for people.
Right.
I wanted to be the conduit for artists
Sure.
and musicians.
Yes.
Because I understand the trauma.
Right.
I understand the depression. I understand the anxiety. I understand all of that from my path of being a musician, being on the road. I mean, my mother passed away when I was 10 years old.
Wow.
And a few years later, my grandmother passed away. A few years after that, my father's mother passed away. So I had a lot of trauma from that.
Right.
Stuff that I never dealt with. I had fear of love, fear of loss, and all that kind of stuff that caused certain behaviors, and it just grew like a tree. I mean, it was a root, and then that tree started to grow, and all these leaves started, and it caused a lot of things to happen in behavior as I became an adult.
Sure.
And I just didn't do the right thing with my life. I didn't eat right.
Sure.
I didn't sleep right. I didn't have self-care. So that aided in a lot of things that happened to me.
Sure. No, it's interesting you developed that insight. So I think what we were doing was laying that groundwork for the book. And when we talk about achieving a winning mindset, I think you helped sort of give us that initial opening into sort of what it took, sort of hearing these things, taking it seriously, and then continuing to study. What are some of those pearls in general that, without giving it all away, that you feel you recommend that people also consider to have that mindset?
Well, in the mindset of healing, I figured out and found out that I have to look at the whole man.
Right.
Not just one, not just my mental, my physical, but the whole man.
Right.
But it starts from here.
Sure.
This is the control mechanism. Starting from here to what you need to deal with. I had an idea to write a book called Think Better, Feel Better.
Sure.
And it's basically about, the things from here kind of resonates in your body.
Yes.
And then that goes to behavior.
Right.
Now, if you don't change your behavior.
Sure, right. You're right, no matter what you think about. Right.
So the first thing you have to do is you have to achieve the winning mindset of where it is you want to go.
Right.
It's not about where you are now,
Right.
because I was in a hospital.
Right.
So my life wasn't based on my current circumstances.
Right.
It was based on here and where I wanted to go.
Right.
So what I did with the book is just talked about my journey and how I used the mindset and the tools to heal. And even at the point when I lost weight,
Yeah.
I still was having issues.
Sure.
So I was like, okay.
What now? I did.
Yeah, I was
this.
like, I'm eating better.
Right.
I lost weight. Why am I still having issues with my leg though?
Right.
Why I'm having issues with my eye? What is that? And I meditated about it. I wrote about it, and then I said, you know why? Because you're only looking at part of the man. That's why. When we talk about having a balanced meal, each part of that, what you put on your plate, does something different.
Sure. Right. Exactly.
So how can I try to heal myself physically when I am mentally tore up?
Right.
How can I say I'm going to heal myself emotionally and physically I messed up?
Right.
So I have to look at, I call them the four bodies. I have to look at all the bodies,
Right.
everything of who you are. And if you don't do that, you're lopsided.
Sure.
You're not looking at the whole thing.
Sure. Talk to us now, and sort of coming full circle, how you're giving back and the way that you sort of live life now.
So, what I want to do now is just give what I've been given.
Sure.
That's what I say. What is my purpose? To give what I've been given. So what have I been given? I have been given the gift to show people how to heal.
Right.
So since I've been shown, then I need to show others.
Right.
And whether that's through, my words,
Sure.
whether that's through my music,
Sure.
whether that's through something that you read,
Right.
that is, I think, my largest, my purpose, and what I try to do now. I want to go talk to anybody
Sure.
that want to hear me, want to listen, and really want to heal. And the thing, everybody is not in a place
No.
that they're ready.
Sure. Absolutely. Yes. You do.
But I want to be that person to help, especially I've had trauma, so I want to be that person to help, especially artists and musicians and people like that, to learn how to deal with that trauma that they've buried, and now that they're triggered. You get on stage, it's a high.
Sure. You're good.
But when you get off stage,
Right.
what happens when you go home? What happens when you go into your dressing room? What do? Do you pick up the bottle?
Right.
Do you smoke?
Right.
Do you go call women? What do you do? So yeah, I want them to know that I understand
Sure.
because I was there.
Exactly. Right. Literally. Yeah. And tell us where we can find you and more about the projects you have.
So my website is I Am Chris Black.
Okay.
Just I Am
Very
Chris
easy.
Black, and so you can find me there. I'm also on Facebook,
Right.
Dr. Chris Black, just Dr. Chris Black. I am on IG, The Chris Black Show.
Sure. Excellent.
So that's basically my social media. The projects that I'm working on now is I created something called Master Your Life.
Okay.
I have two things: Master Your Life series, Master Your Life Health and Wellness. And basically with that is helping people. Of course, we can never master
Sure.
who we are, but helping people to strive to get to the point they can conquer or they can master or thrive for that. So I wrote three, I call them action planners. And it's, you go through it, and each point you got to do something
Right.
that's going to help you heal, whether it's learning how to forgive when they won't forgive you,
Right.
or learning how to remove fear, whatever that is. And each book has a different title to that. And I have people to go through that particular program to do that. Also just counseling, with people to help them, get through, and you can, find it out just going to the website, and just going, different places and speak. You
Sure.
know, that's some stuff I'm working on now. One of the projects I'm currently working on is with my Master Your Life is helping organizations, helping companies
Sure, right.
with the people that work. You know, going through employers
Right.
to do all what we've been talking about
Right.
to help their employees.
Right, right.
You know,
To better be more
to
productive.
better, whether it's like I said, I understand weight loss because I was a big guy.
Right. 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 You wouldn't know it. No, I think it's so phenomenal, and we can't do enough to sort of publicize our brothers and sisters that are providing these types of services. They're out there, so we'll do everything we can to promote it and things like that. And yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the show and feeling so comfortable to share this story.
Oh, thank you
because
so much.
It's not a disease that a lot of people know about or have experienced, and also even less common in men.
Right,
So
right,
there are a
right,
lot
right,
of
right.
exceptions. But conversely, the story that you shared about being on the road or working super hard in whatever field it may be and not necessarily taking care of yourself is something almost all of us can relate to.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it's good to be aware that we need to certainly think about our minds and our bodies first. So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
thanks so
yeah.
much for joining us. Really appreciate
Man,
it.
thanks for
Sure.
having me.
Yeah,
You know, I appreciate it.
Sure. Absolutely.
All
A
right.
pleasure. Sure.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.